Is up, plant people? It's time again for another episode of the Planthropology Podcast, the show where we dive into the lives and careers of some very, very cool, very awesome plant people. I'm Vikram Baliga, your host and your humble guide in this journey through the natural sciences. And we're not talking about plants today. Well, we are, just not just about plants. My guest today is a very wonderful human being, a really good guy who I feel like I've become instant friends with, named Nate Marshall. Now, that name may or may not mean anything to you yet. I promise you it will very soon. But the name Give Bats a Break might. See, over the past few weeks, weeks and months, I have had an interesting experience of getting to know Bat Twitter. I know. I didn't think that would be my thing either. But you heard from Natalie Sabin a few weeks ago, who is a very cool bat person and ecologist, when we talked about the history of gardens. She's also a very cool garden person. But I have gotten connected with this guy, Nate, who's the brain and soul and heart behind the Give Bats a Break Twitter channel and Instagram page and Facebook page and YouTube channel and everything else. Now, you're never going to guess how Give Bats a Break rose to Bat Twitter prominence. I'll give you a second. Think about it. Okay, so Nate tweeted at the Pope. The Pope, yes, that one with the capital P, the hat, and the Vatican, all that. The Pope, about bats after a tweet that the Pope's social media team put out last year. And it just really resonated with people, and it's become this cool thing. So Nate just launched a podcast called Give Bats a Podcast, which makes sense because of Give Bats a Break. And that came out as you're listening to this, if you listen to this as it drops, last Friday. And that's a thing that you should definitely go listen to. We talk about that more later. But I thought it would be great, as I've connected with Nate and his story is so cool. I thought it'd be cool to bring him on the show and talk about his experience and talk about the role that bats play in ecosystems and in pollination and the things they eat, like fruit. Lots and lots of bats eat fruit. And the bad PR that, for a variety of reasons, bats have gotten over the years. And Nate graciously agreed to be on. He is such a cool dude, and I had just so much fun talking with him. As you hear, I probably laughed more than I needed to, and I feel like he and I have become fast friends. So without too much more blabbering about bats, because you're going to get to hear lots of discussion about bats that comes from someone who's way better at it than I am. I want to jump into it. I will see you people at the mid-roll, and we'll talk about a great new show that's part of the podcast network to which I belong. We'll talk about some cool stuff coming up and a lot of other things. But for now, buckle up and get ready for a great episode of Planthropology with Nate Marshall from Give Bats a Break. All right. Well, Nate, man, I'm so excited to have you with me today. How's it going?
I am stoked as well. And it's going well. It's a beautiful day. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, as we record this, it is the first day of fall, 2021. That's something.
That is something. And I can't believe we made it.
Right?
It doesn't feel real somehow. But there's like an air of hope at the same time. Like we're going into this spooky season. I'm a basic white chick, so I'm all about spooky season.
Have you jumped into the pumpkin spice lattes yet? Are you dressing like Han Solo yet?
Almost. Well, the Han Solo thing, almost. The pumpkin spice everything, freaking yes, absolutely. Already, that almost doesn't stop. In fact, I found I'm lactose intolerant, for anybody that was wondering. And so I drink almond milk, and there's this really, really good cold brew that my wife found. I think it comes from Trader Joe's, or maybe I can't remember, but it's almond milk and it's cold brew, and it's like a pumpkin spice. It comes in this big, like, I don't know, 40 or 50 something ounce carafe, and I have consumed 2 of them by myself. It only takes me like a day to do. And
I'm impressed.
They're really stinking tasty. I'll see if I can remember the brand before the episode's out. But yeah,
we'll put it in the show notes.
Pumpkin spice, everything. I mean, I've got spiders dangling around me.
I see them.
Yeah, and 'tis the season, bro.
It is. It is. And so you're also in the South in Georgia, is that right?
Heck yeah, y'all.
See, I'm gonna have to do the whole intro to this in like a thick Wex Texas drawl, and just I can turn it on when I need to. But so fall is like theoretical, I think in probably the places we live, right? Like it's still 90 degrees.
Yeah, it's I've discovered, so I'm originally from Southern California. I did junior high and high school in North Dallas, Texas, because there's a Dallas, Georgia as well, which really threw me for a loop when I got here. People were like, Dallas this, Dallas that. I was like, y'all are traveling all the way to Dallas?
That is
and
so
like,
far.
Dallas, Georgia. And I was like, no, that's not a thing. But okay.
You're making that up.
But I've been there now and I can't deny it any longer. So yeah, in Texas, as you know, fall is like a concept. It's on the postcards. It's nice to think about. We don't get it. Southern California is a desert with good irrigation. There's no fall there. And then being here is the closest thing I've actually gotten to a fall. That, like, as I look around me now, out the windows, there are some colors changing. Occasionally you can hear a leaf rustling across the ground. It is pretty nice, but there's only about like 2 to 3 weeks of like true fall weather.
Yeah.
Which is
enjoy it while you can. That's what I'm doing. It was nice and cool this morning, and it's headed to 85. So we'll see what happens. So now that we've talked about the weather and lactose intolerance and pumpkin spice, tell us more about you.
Well, hi. My name's Nathaniel Marshall. Most everyone calls me Nate, including my wife, not my children. They call me Daddy. I am, I'm a plumber by trade. Has been my professional career for the last, 7 to 8 years now.
Wow.
Only, I think 5 of those years have been spent in the field, though. The rest of the time I've been in an office in some capacity, assistant managing, operations managing now. And, bats for those that may know me, and most likely don't, but if you do at all, and you're not like my friend or my wife or my children, it's from Twitter. There's a little Twitter account that I operate called Give Bats a Break, and bats are a thing for me. I enjoy them. I'm a bat enjoyer, casually most of my life, but a little more investedly in the last year and a half or so.
I think you're being modest about your little account, because I mean, you've got 15,000 followers now, and
yeah, almost 14 and a half, which still, just like fall in the South, it doesn't feel real.
Yeah. So okay, where did this like fascination or love of bats start for you?
It started as a kid. I can't remember if I saw them like in zoo books, or I remember my parents had, and actually still have, like this big anthology that was just called Animals. And it was just a broad overview of animals from all over the world. Beautiful photography, really, really nice, like coffee table type book. That was really densely packed with information, and I loved looking at the bats in that book, and then zoo books, like I said a second ago, kind of played in at some point. But I don't know, man. They're so weird. Like, they're so funny. They're like a land mammal, but they live in the sky, and they are kind of this puppy looking thing, but they've got pig noses sometimes, and they, like dance among the stars, but like eat worms from the ground. Like, they're such a conundrum. They're a paradox in an animal, and I just love that about them. And so yeah.
And I love that it's so like it's so what I think is super fascinating about your whole thing, the whole Give Bats a Break account and everything you do, is that it's not like your job, right? You're not a biologist, you're not like, you're a plumber. And I love that you do this just and I mean that with like the highest amount of praise, because I think that if you do something like that, you know, pays the bills, that you probably enjoy, you know, as for a career, it's cool that you found another passion for biology and nature and all this other stuff.
Yeah, it's I mean, don't get me wrong. I would like for this to be something that I could actually do full time. but until that day, yeah, it's been a fun journey, man. I didn't expect it. It was not in the cards as far as I knew. And it has become a very time-consuming hobby. And I don't like, that's not a complaint. That's not belly aching. Sure. Like, it's a lot of fun. It's I have to put like boundaries because otherwise I could spend an entire day, like 24 solid uninterrupted hours, just like engaging on Twitter and doing a little bit on Instagram and doing some reading and posting and making content. Like, I could easily do that. And I am tempted to sometimes, but I do have a wife and children. So
yeah, that's important too.
Spending time with them and like then working as well.
Being a grown up, man.
Being an adult. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a trap, by the way, like this whole adulthood thing that I'm in my, oh goodness, I'm about to say mid-30s. I'm in my mid-30s now. And it's like, oh no, I can't get out. I'm here now, which is fine. I actually love being 34. It's been a good year in a weird way.
I saw somebody on Twitter the other day that that posted, doesn't matter if you're 20 or in your mid-30s, you officially become an adult when you realize you're scared of teenagers.
Oh, they're so scary. No, it's true.
That really resonated. I was like, I'm at that point. I think I'm an adult because they freak me out a little bit now. Like, I don't want to summon their ire or draw the aggro to myself from any wandering teen. And I'm in my early 30s. So yeah, I feel that.
So, that's funny. I teach a lot of 18, 19-year-olds. And I look out at my class some days. I'm like, do your parents know you're here? Like, are you old enough to be in this room? I think I'm getting old. But yeah. Okay, back to give Bats a Break. When you started your Twitter account, did you start this? Like, was this the thing you started, or was it like a personal Twitter that has turned into Give Bats a Break?
Yeah, definitely wasn't what it is now. So when I started the account, what I had intended for it to be, because I thought it would do numbers, and these types of accounts do numbers, is like a bat every hour, bat every day, like picture scraper account, which if you're listening, no, don't do that. That's bad. Yeah. If you're going to do it, like, give proper attribution. That was not a thing for me at the time, thinking about attribution and how important that is. But yeah, so when the account started, I just was like Googling 24 pictures a day. I got like a basic level Hootsuite account so that I could schedule my tweets. And it was not the jam. It was not a sustainable way of doing it. Come to find out that people write coding for this and like
really
find the pictures for them and like put them in tweets for them. And like, I'm this idiot sitting here Googling like bat art and like cute bats and like flying foxes and then downloading them. And it just it wasn't the way to go about it. And so pretty quickly I realized, like about 2 weeks, that that was not actually that much fun for me as the one doing the account. And two, I also couldn't like stop myself from interacting with people that would end up commenting on stuff. And I also discovered that that was enjoyable, whereas finding and posting the pictures wasn't necessarily as enjoyable. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this now. This is evolution number one. I have now become a bat apologist account, and where
all bats all the time.
All bats all the time. Not just pictures. The pictures aren't enough. It's good, but it's not sufficient. I'm gonna like actually talk to people about the bats that I'm posting about, and that was only about another 2 weeks of time. So at this point, this is like 4 weeks in. I started the account, we'll say April 1 or the 2nd of April, something like that.
Sure.
On April 24th, the Pope happened.
Yeah, we have to talk about the Pope.
And that is what really got me to where I am today, was Pope Francis. So
I love that so much, because like my next question was like, please tell me about the Pope.
Let me tell you about the Pope. So me and Francis had a spat. We had just a momentary, very one-sided conversation in which him or his social media team at the Vatican. How do you get that job, by the way?
That's something.
How do you become the social media manager for the Vatican?
For the Vatican. Yeah, that's something.
That's a thing. So, they pulled a quote from one of his homilies in which he basically said something to the effect of when humans are in a state of sin, they go about in darkness like human bats, committing their evils and something. So now, at the level of theology, like, I got what he was saying and didn't necessarily agree, or disagree rather. Like, sure, like, we do things that we're not proud of and like we hide while we're doing them. Like, that seems pretty obvious to me. That if we're gonna do naughty things that we don't want people watching, right?
Right.
But I also wasn't sure whether or not the Vatican social media manager was aware that there was a global pandemic happening that was being blamed on bats. And so I was like, maybe instead of like adding this like religious layer to this where like bats are already being collectively crapped on, how about we take this animal and like think about it positively instead? So I offered like a counter theological reflection in which bats are actually symbols and examples of what we should be and can do, rather than being an example of what we shouldn't be. Because it's easier to give people like do this rather than don't do this, right?
Right.
And so it was a little 4-tweet response to him, and it blew up, and that was wild.
So, okay, when you say blew up, I think we need some context, because you asked when we were messaging back and forth trying to get all this scheduled and just kind of like getting to know each other. You sent me a message on Twitter that said, "Have you ever gone viral?" And I said, "No." And you said, "Don't do it." and I laughed so hard at that, because I was like, because what's funny is everyone on Twitter, that's like the show, right? Like,
right.
In your mind, it's like, oh, I want to go viral. I'm going to be famous. People are going to love me. What was that like? What is going viral like?
So it's funny because it's like, you said it a minute ago, that's like the goal, right? Like on social media, it's like everyone dreams of one day going viral. Just like everyone dreams of like one day winning the lottery or having something crazy like that happen. And it seems like the ultimate good. Wrong. That is the wrong way of thinking about it. It is well, okay, my answer on this is kind of torn, right? Because like, let me describe it to you. So I'm my tweets, right? They're each individually, they're being liked, retweeted, quote tweeted. I'm getting comments under each and every one of them, of the 4 of them. And then you've got people that are like finding you and following you as a result, right? And so in the course of basically like 48 hours, I went from having less than 200 followers on the account to having over 5,000
Wow.
in the course of 2 days. This is not like slow growth. This is it was a total and complete accident. This whole thing continues to be a total and complete accident. And because you can't predict it, right? Virality, you can craft a tweet in such a way that like you can almost guarantee that it does well. Like if you look at your analytics and you're like, and you really study it, you can this time of day, this type of content, like you can narrow stuff down and so that it'll do well. But virality is not something that can be predicted. And I didn't predict it the first time and didn't see it coming the second or third time either. But like that first time, dude, it was, the notifications are pouring in. I can't get to the top of them at all. Period. Like I keep swiping down and it keeps going up and they just keep pouring in. And I was sitting here scrolling and like responding to comments and quote tweets and stuff until it had to have been 5 or 6 o'clock the next morning.
Wow.
I couldn't sleep. Didn't really want to sleep at that point, which is very out of character for me because I am a sleeper. I enjoy a snooze. But I just could not. I was hooked. Like it was such a rush and time seemed to just stand still and speed past all at once. It was somebody I'm sure has done the study on like the physiological effects of virality in social media. If they haven't, they should, because I feel like it is a very unique thing. But yeah, dude, my body was freaking out. And so it was fun the first time, because it had never happened before, right? So like the novelty of it was just like, whoa, I can't believe like I'm the chosen one in this moment. But then at the same time, what virality is good for and why the don't do it comment was maybe only half of the joke is because, dude, it gives you so much, especially as a science communicator, right? Like, or in maybe more in your case, like for like the podcasting portion of it too. Well, for both of us now. I don't know why I singled you out because I'm getting into the game as well. But like, there's so much good opportunity to talk to people. You are a professor, you're never going to have 100,000 people in your classroom at once.
No.
But like when you go viral and you're getting to like the 5, 6, 7 digit numbers as far as reach, like there is no human physical opportunity where that's ever going to happen.
Right.
It will only happen on social media, right? So like this last time I went viral, which was a couple weeks ago, 2 tweets within a few days of each other that both blew up. The third one for sure being the biggest. Third in terms of like the Pope and then these two. The first one ended up getting 12,500 likes and like 5,000 retweets and something like that. And then a third one was a friend sent me a picture from Reddit and I thought it was like, this is so good. And so I screenshot it and put it up there, linked to the Redditor, like to the original post. And it ended up getting like 167,000 likes and got shared like 20,000 times.
That is crazy.
And it ended up being a giant conversation about rabies, which was honestly, I kind of saw it coming because of the picture. It was this guy, if you weren't on Twitter or didn't see it, it was this guy who got to work and went to put on his headphones that cover his ears and said he felt something furry. So he pulled his headphones off and looked in, and there's a little pipistrelle bat that was like just nuzzled into the ear cup. And, people freaking out like about rabies and everything else, which is like understandable because most people, that's the only story they've ever heard about bats is that they're virus carrying, disease spreading, gross, icky, yucky animals. And so if that's all you ever heard, then like, yeah, but, so it was a really good opportunity to talk to thousands of people, about like, bats and the likelihood of it carrying rabies and what should be done just in case they do. And it forced me into actually doing a lot of reading because my followers aren't only from the United States. I've got a pretty big UK contingent as well. And so for them, learning like the difference between classical rabies virus and European bat lyssavirus, of which there is a 1 and a 2. There are 2 versions of it. I didn't know this before this went viral because I'd never had to think about it or study it before.
Right.
And so I think for folks like us who are communicating science, it was a really good opportunity to learn and then to do what we hope to do on a daily basis at scale for like a very short window of time. And so it's like those moments of virality are like almost like what the rest of our time are preparing us for. It's like this is the momentary big league in which I can go in and like do this a lot for a lot of people really quickly. And so don't do it. Don't seek virality just for its own sake. Like if you've got something to share, like it's a helpful tool.
Yeah.
But the second and third time, it was the same thing. We're just like notifications. I finally learned to like mute it for a few hours at a time, unmute it, go check notifications, mute it, like spend some time responding
Right.
for like an hour, mute it again. Like there's a way to do it well. And I think I only just figured it out on this last one that like, oh, this is how I should have been doing this like the other times too. But
Yeah.
you know, experience.
Well, I'm going to say it's probably not going to be the last time you get to deal with that, problem issue, because you've got great content and you share great information about bats and their roles. Well, what I think is interesting, let me back up a little bit. You share great information about bats themselves, in and of themselves. I think that that's something that we as humans are real bad about is judging nature, judging life, judging everything by its utility. Right. And so like, I do want to talk about here in a minute, like bats and their roles in the ecosystem, in, human civilization as, insectivores and like pollinators and all these things. But I think something that you do a great job of is giving them value in and of themselves, right? They are important because they're living creatures and they're so cool just because they're cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome. And I think that's a good just overall vibe to have on social media, especially.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It's hard, because like a lot of people how do I say this? I think some people have to see the utility before they see the intrinsic value. It's like they'll arrive there eventually, but like they have to know. We can't expect people to like immediately shift away from an anthropocentric view of the world in an existence just to like look at this animal for a second. It's like it's not a natural shift, right? Like they have to have a paradigm shift over time in order to get to that point where they look at a bat and say like, oh, you are valuable just because you are you. You are valuable because you exist, and you deserve to exist, not because you provide any kind of ecosystem benefit or because of any other reason, but just by the virtue that you happen to exist in this moment in time.
Right.
That's a hard thing to ask of people. And so going through, not being offended when people want to know like, how is this bat useful in the ecosystem in which it lives? If you jump right to the finger wagging and the well, first of all, it's like being an actually guy, sort of. It's like you don't want to actually people when they're asking genuine questions, right? And so if they ask like, how is this one useful? Like you answer the utility question, you show that like, yeah, there's utility, but like they're also just really freaking amazing. Like you get there. The conversation will go there if you engage with people genuinely and like entertain their questions and acknowledge and affirm their emotions. There's a lot of emotions that come out when it comes to bats, typically like negative ones. And so just acknowledging those and not being a jerk and like, that's completely unfounded. I'm here to tell you that bat was not attacking you and your fear was completely unfounded because XYZ. People don't have time for that. You know what I mean? And if I like try to prove them wrong, so Merlin Tuttle, Dr. Merlin Tuttle, whose name you may know, but he's one of the most like public facing bat biologists, researchers, conservationists possibly ever. And back in my zoo book days, that was who I knew. Merlin
Yeah.
Tuttle was like my gateway to bats in a very real sense. And in fact, even my name, Give Bats a Break, that's actually a title of an essay that he wrote a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and it was directed not actually so much at the public, but it was actually directed at fellow scientists, to say like, listen, we spend a lot of resources and time poking and prodding bats to find the next virus. And it like happens invariably, whenever there is something that reaches epidemic or pandemic status, bats get blamed for it.
Right.
And so he's basically like, all this time that we've spent researching, I don't know that it's actually been effective. I don't know that like predicting where the next virus, the next zoonotic virus is going to spill over from an animal species to human populations. It hasn't stopped it from happening yet. So why are we wasting time? Like, we need to give the bats a break. Like, just give them a break. Like, just let them be. Like, just trust that nature's going to take its course.
Right.
And like, let's let them rest and relax for a little bit. So it's interesting that's actually where the name comes from. It was actually directed at scientists, but I thought that like the public also needed to hear that same message too. Like, we need to give bats a break. They don't need to be vilified. They don't need to be, feared, or, hated, killed needlessly, because that happens. And so, yeah, I can't remember how I got on that tangent. Give bats a break. Merlin Tuttle. Merlin Tuttle is possibly the most like well-known of the bat biologists.
Right.
And I can't remember actually why I was going to say that.
So we were talking about but I think that was a good tangent, because I think that actually addressed the question or the topic. We were talking about like how to approach the public, right? How to approach the subject. And I liked what you were discussing in terms of, and I haven't really thought of it in that way. Again, I get my scientist academia brain sometimes, but there are so many fights that are picked, especially on Twitter, and unfortunately often by my fellow scientists on Twitter, that don't need to be, because we need to meet people where they are, right? Like you were talking about how people have maybe some deep-rooted fears or whatever about bats because of whatever life experience. And if we just try to like you said, well, actually them, that doesn't get us anywhere. That's not good communication.
Right. And actually that's where Merlin Tuttle came in my mind, was something that he says, is that we need to win friends, not battles. I love that. That is like a North Star for me. And my goal is never to win with the facts. Because if you win with the facts, but you lose the relationship, there's no second opportunity to communicate the facts. And so you build the relationship and say like, hey, yeah, if I found a bat in my room, I'd probably pee my pants too. Like, I get it, Now, was it in there to bite them and give them rabies? Like, no, probably not. But like, that's not the moment to communicate that. It's like acknowledging the emotion, acknowledging the fear, acknowledging that like there is a broader context to this. And then once the relationship is built, if they ask further questions or if there's more opportunity, or like in the context of Twitter, they decide to give me a follow because they like the interaction, they're gonna learn. Like if you're gonna follow me, you're gonna learn about bats eventually. Whether you intended to or not is a different question. But if you're following me, you're gonna learn something.
Yeah.
And so winning friends, not battles, is it's a very important philosophy to me in what I do.
I love that a lot. That should be a t-shirt. That should be your next t-shirt. By the way, I ordered a t-shirt yesterday and I'm sad that it's not here. We'll talk about your merch later. But that was relevant now.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be back to talk more about bats. Well, hey there. Welcome to the mid-roll. It is great as always to have you here. This is just time that you and I can sit down and chat. How are you doing? Is your life going okay? You doing well? I hope you are. Hey, so if you'd like to chat in a different way than me talking at you and you pretending to listen, go connect on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, even though as I record this, Facebook and Instagram are down. Who knows what's going to happen with that? It could be a brave new world without the two of them. And that's okay. We'll get by. Connect on Twitter, search for Planthropology, and look for the Bristlecone Pine. Wherever you see that, you'll find me. I'm also over on the TikTok machine as @theplantprof, and so you can go watch my silly antics over there. Thanks so much to the Texas Tech Department of Plant and Soil Science for the support of the show. It means the world, and it could absolutely not be done without the department's support. It's great, and they've been wonderful through this process. For today's mid-roll entertainment, I've got a trailer from the newest podcast in the Podfix Network. And if you're not following Podfix Network, make sure you go do that and see all the great shows there. Whether you like silly entertainment, thoughtful conversations, animals, plants, anything in between, you can find it at the Podcast Network. Our newest show, or one of our two newest shows, is called The Irrationally Exuberant, which is described as part podcast, but also art. Podcast, but also art. I like to think that most podcasts are art of some form. It is comedy mostly, and it's a lot of fun. You can find great topics on everything from Chris Gaines. I don't even think Garth Brooks likes Chris Gaines, to information about platypuses, to bees and reptilians and Marie Osmond and everything and anything in between. It's a lot of fun. It's a great show. They're a wonderful addition to the Podfix Network, and we're just so great to have them. So go listen to this trailer coming up in just a few seconds. Go check out the show, subscribe, listen wherever you get your podcasts, and I will love you forever for doing that. I love you forever anyway. So here is a trailer for The Irrationally Exuberant, starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is The Irrationally Exuberant. I'm Reed Messerschmidt.
Family, friends, fans. Bono, I see you over there. Looks like a carelessly basted turkey with the head still on, but the head got stung by a bee and it's allergic to bees.
Johnny? Are you awake, Johnny? Yes, Bigfoot. I was just smelling your arm fur and thinking about how much I love you. I love you more than that old moon and his bright little friends, the stars.
This is the story of the time I found myself in front of the frying pan at 3 a.m, drunk of course, wearing a blood-stained suit and a backpack full of potatoes. This is the story of the time a grizzled old hobo asked me if I was okay. The Irrationally Exuberant is a podcast, but also art. Find it at theirrationallyexuberant.com, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Iceberg Slim and bees and Roy Orbison. What could these things possibly have in common?
So I want to talk subject matter a little bit. I want to talk about bats themselves, because we've talked about, Twitter and the way you've gotten into this and all of that, and I love that. I think it's such a good, in some ways, like directing and maybe in some ways cautionary tale for people that are like, I want to get Twitter famous. Like there's a right way to do it, and maybe not a less right way to do it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about bats, because I think people have this picture in their brain that every bat is the vampire bat that's going to land on your face and eat your eyeballs or whatever, and that's not what they do anyway. But I think we have this big mental image because of popular media and all kinds of other things that bats are there to drink your blood and give you rabies, kind of like you just said. So can you tell us just a little bit about, like, I don't even know how to ask this question. It's maybe a stupid question, but like, what do bats do? How do the bats do?
What is bat? Why bats? Yeah. So it's not a stupid question. And actually it really isn't a question that has been sufficiently answered among bat researchers. I mean, it's why the discipline exists, is because they are so enigmatic. There's so every time we think we know something about a bat, bats are like, nope, not that, and like throw a curveball. So like even just recently, there was a conversation. Dr. Aaron Corcoran, who on Twitter, he posted some new research about bat migration, hoary bats specifically, Lasiurus cinereus. They're a migratory species here in North America, and we assumed that as they're traveling long distance, that they are using echolocation when it's dark. That's like kind of the common idea, is that it's dark, their eyes aren't able to perceive as well in the dark, and so they vocalize and hear those echoes as they come back to them to sort of like orient themselves in space, and especially so when it's dark. They basically glued these trackers to the back of these hoary bats as they were migrating, and recorded them like once every, I think, 10 seconds. They were taking an audio clip of different echolocation calls, whether they were social calls or feeding calls or orientation calls, which there's a difference between all these different types of echolocation, which is a different discussion. But they actually discovered that while migrating, hoary bats were silent the majority of the time. They spent like 80% of their time just completely quiet, just doing just like flying, like navigating. Not just in open air, but like around things and through things and like in trees and forests and stuff. They were not echolocating nearly as much as was hypothesized. And so now we've gone from bats see with their eyes to bats see, quote unquote, with their ears, because echolocation, to, actually they don't really use their eyes or their ears in ways that we thought that they did. And they probably, they're using them, but just it escapes our understanding exactly how they're using them and why and when. It's like such basic questions, like, how do bats use their eyeballs? How do bats use their ears? It's like, we don't actually freaking know.
We have no idea.
We're still trying to figure it out. These questions that are like so elementary about them, that have been discovered and understood for decades in other animals, other taxa, we're still figuring it out for bats.
Wow.
Yeah. Up until fairly recently, like within the last, I don't know, 100 or so years, up until about 100 years ago, early 1900s, bats were thought that possibly they were primates. And actually that theory continued into the 1900s for a good while, all the way even into the 1960s or 70s. There were some scientists that were still postulating that perhaps they actually do belong to primates. One hypothesis that I like in particular, just for the poetic value, is something called the fallen angel hypothesis, in which primates actually evolved as flyers first, and then they became flightless. They lost their ability to fly, from whence came us. So actually we're like ground bats rather than bats being sky primates, which they're not primates, by the way. They belong to their own order. But yeah, so I think that that's pretty funny at a number of levels. And I don't know, it's cool. It's cool to be able to ask these questions, and J.D. Pettigrew was the scientist that put this forward. He's from Australia, and he really believed it, man. Like he really thought that like this was the answer, until it was proven, because of like our ability to look at genomes and DNA and stuff. It was proven pretty much without a doubt that like, sorry, bro, nope.
Didn't work that way.
Didn't turn out to be the case. But it was fun because like now they're like, you have to deal with the question. Like now that he's asked it, it's like, okay, well actually now we have to wrestle with some of these things, and like where echolocation comes from, and whether flight or echolocation came first, and when did flight in bats even evolve? We don't know. We don't know when it happened. We don't know where it came from. We have ideas, but we don't know for sure. So yeah, bats are a giant mystery and continue to be so.
It's fascinating. So if they're not trying to eat us, like some people think, what do bats eat? What are their main like food sources? Because I know, or at least my understanding, I'll say it that way, because I don't know a whole lot about bats, is that there are like fruit bats and then like insectivorous bats, and then I mean some that are blood feeders. So like what do bats eat? What's their role in the ecosystem?
Yeah, so they're at the most recent count, there are 1,434 species of bats.
Wow.
And the only other order of animal that outnumbers them are rodents, rodentia. So so the answer to that question is all of the above and then some, because they are extremely diverse. They have filled ecological niches all over the world in different ways. So yeah, you've got fruit eaters, you've got insect eaters, and there's specialists within both of those, right? Like they're not eating all the insects or all the fruit.
Sure.
But certain species will specialize in certain insects or fruit. You've got carnivorous bats that will eat small birds, other small bats. There are fishermen bats that have evolved the ability to echolocate over the top of the water and sense the rippling in the water to like locate fish underneath the surface. And they've got these giant back feet. I mean, we're talking impressive, dude. Massive back feet that they will troll right through the top of the water and hook a fish, and then they swing it up. And they have these giant cheek pouches that they'll sling the fish into and hold it in their cheek pouch, and then like munch on it on their way back. And yeah, there's fisherman bat. They're blood eaters, like you mentioned. Which on that note, 1,430 some odd species of bats. Only 3 of them eat blood. Only blood. Obviously, if you're eating another animal, you're also consuming its blood.
Sure.
But 3 that consume exclusively blood. And they are all 3 of them in the tropics and neotropics. They're down south of us, in Mexico, further down in Central America, and in the north of South America as well. And that's it. The rest of them don't. And actually, vampire bats were named after the monster, not the other way around. So,
okay.
So vampire mythology is much older than our knowledge of vampire bats.
Sure.
And so when we discovered that there was a bat that was consuming blood, it got the name vampire from the existing mythos, which is interesting to note. But yeah, so they do a lot. They eat a lot of things, and the flying foxes are exclusively fruit eaters and pollinators. Then you've got in the neotropics, that's so fruit eating actually evolved twice separately in 2 separate populations of bats, and they both have insect eating bats as ancestors. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, so the theory is that they would consume the insect that was on the foliage or on the fruit, and then over time developed a taste for the fruit rather than the insect, and so would now brush the insect off to the side and go after the flower or the fruit. So it kind of developed in that way. And interestingly, blood eating, sanguivore, evolved in a similar way. So like while the bats, also insect eaters, were feeding on, like, let's say maggots that were infesting a dead carcass where there was still some fresh blood, over time they had less of a taste for the maggots and more of a taste for the blood itself. And their systems were already evolving in such a way that they were able to metabolize the blood via the insects that they were eating. And so it was just sort of cutting out the middleman and going right for what they were actually needing from the insect, which was the blood itself. So yeah, man, it's so fascinating. And there's the answer to anything bat related is never short. And I'm long-winded as it is, which makes it even worse. But
it's a podcast. That's the point. It's supposed to be.
Dude.
I have a very specific question to pass on to you, and it's a question that I got in a previous career, and I think I may have asked Natalie Sabin this same question. I think she just laughed at me, which I probably, is reasonable once you hear it. So I had a person call me one time, and she was like, "I have mosquitoes," and I said, "Okay." And she said, I would like bats to eat my mosquitoes. And then there was a pause on my end, and I was like, oh, okay. And she was like, where can I buy bats? I said, I don't think that's a thing. Can you buy bats? Is that a thing?
You can, but it's highly illegal.
You can, but don't.
You're a shady person if you are purchasing bats for private use. So don't do that. Or if you do, don't admit to it.
Yeah, don't tell us.
Yeah, no, you can't go to the pet store and buy them. You're not going to find them at your local pest supply. No, you cannot purchase bats for that use. And actually, this is a pretty hotly debated topic as well. The bats as mosquito suppression. So yes, bats do consume mosquitoes, but we actually don't know exactly how many. The 1,000 an hour figure gets thrown around a lot. Like about 1,000 mosquitoes an hour on an average size insectivorous bat in North America. That may or may not be true. That was actually taken from like the experiment that number came from was done with one bat that was hungry in a controlled environment in which mosquitoes were released, and it had 15 minutes. And so, and so then they took that and extrapolated the numbers out to an hour, and it wasn't. So anyway, the 1,000 an hour thing is like the popular number, and that's what gets kind of bandied about in the media. Hundreds probably, and like and like not an insignificant amount. We'll put it that way. But they're probably actually not as great at suppressing pests, maybe like mosquitoes specifically, as it is proposed. And more study really has to be done on it so that we can say more definitively how many they're eating and what that effect is. What I can say with relative certainty, there was a study that was done by a Tom Coons, who actually just passed away last year. He did a study on the agricultural industry and bats as pest control for farmers, and discovered that on average, bats were saving farmers somewhere in the neighborhood of about $20 billion to $30 billion a year in crop killing pests.
Wow.
So like not an insignificant amount of money. And obviously, and this is science, right? Like the numbers get extrapolated here as well, but like this was a much more probably carefully controlled experiment and analysis. And yeah, it's they do play a role in pest suppression. They do contribute to the ecological niche in which you find them, and they're actually an indicator species too, which means there are animals that, like, if they are present, they're so delicate as animals, like they're so specific and calibrated that, like, if something, just the smallest thing, is off in a ecosystem, they can't hang. They got to move on. It's like the meme of like really cute breeds of dog, and like there's the wolf, and it was like, we eat raw meat and exist and blah blah blah, and then there's like this thing that's like, I can't drink chlorinated water, or like water from the tap. It's like that idea. It's like bats are kind of like on that spectrum where they're like they're very delicate, like their systems are such that like everything has got to be perfect in the ecosystem. So actually, if you have bats around, it's normally a sign of having a healthy ecosystem around you, which is great news.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Congratulations if that's you. If you've looked around and seen bats, you have won.
That's really cool. I was down in the Texas Hill Country near Fredericksburg. I don't know if you've ever been to Fredericksburg, Texas. It's like kind of the wine.
But haven't been there.
It's like kind of the wine capital of Texas, and it's near Austin. And there's an old train tunnel near there, about half an hour out of Fredericksburg, where you can go watch a bat emergence, and it's really cool. It's like I don't remember how big. Maybe a 500,000 or more bat colony. So it's a big emergence. And we were down there kind of at the end of July a few years ago, and the fireflies happened to be out at that time. And it was really cool because we were sitting there, it was getting dark, all the fireflies are coming out, and there's just lights, and then you start to hear the bats kind of chirping, and then the lights start going out. And so as they were coming out, they were eating the fireflies. And it was dark, so you could just barely see the bats, but you could hear them and kind of like feel like the presence of them. But it was just so cool to just sit there and see like all these little twinkling lights, and then like hear the bats, and like they start eating the fireflies and they start eating other stuff. And that was just such a cool experience.
Yeah, seeing those emergencies, I have actually, like, confession, not seen one ever in person. So that's like on the to-do list for me. It's probably going to happen next year, because next year is the big. So the North American Society for Bat Research is the exactly what it sounds like, and they have a conference every year, either in Canada, the U.S., or Mexico, and it was canceled this year, but next year it's in Austin. And it's also happening jointly with another international conference happening at the same time. And so all that to say, I will be in Austin this time next year. And I bet being like either at, Congress City Bridge, or going to Bracken Cave, or in San Antonio, or being somewhere where bats in the hundreds of thousands or possibly even millions are exiting, I will be there. And it will be a dream come true, very literally. But yeah, in South Texas, the Mexican free-tailed bat, I'm guessing, is probably what you saw.
Yeah, I think so.
Emerge. Yeah, and so they're by far the most voluminous bat in Texas. But they, they're actually the fastest flyer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so people are like peregrine falcon. Well, sorry,
bird Twitter, man.
Sorry, bird Twitter. Sorry, peregrine people. They do have the fastest dive, but the Mexican free-tailed bat is the fastest powered flyer of any flying anything. They clock in at 100 miles an hour.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah,
super.
And
cool.
They're not big. They're like the size of like a stick of gum, like in length, right? And their wingspan is maybe 12 inches or so. And these suckers move, man.
That is so cool. That's so cool. I mean, I could ask 1,000 questions probably about bats, but I don't want to let you get away. And I know I've kept you probably longer than I needed to already. But it's such a fascinating conversation. And again, I love getting to do this podcast because I can learn about stuff that I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And like, as a academic guy, this is happy for me. This is my happy place. Let's talk about the podcast that you're starting. Give Bats a Podcast, which is I love that name.
We're giving them a break, so give them a podcast while you're at it. Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. So it is. I've discovered that if there's anything less known than bats, it's the researchers that study them. Like, people will know what a bat is, but like, if they were to know anybody that studies bats, it is most likely Merlin Tuttle. But Merlin is not the only bat researcher. He's a darn good one, and has probably done more single-handedly for bat conservation than possibly any other individual in any given lifetime. But there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of people globally that are studying bats, that have dedicated their entire academic careers and professional careers beyond that, whatever form that takes, in studying these animals and trying to understand them better. And I'm talking to them. That's the point of the podcast, is it's not just a bat fact podcast.
Right.
Obviously facts do come up, but like, the point isn't just the facts. It's actually to talk to the people that are doing the research about like why they got into bats in the first place, what their research entails, crazy stories from the field, for those that do field work, and they are crazy. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. People from learning just wide and varied bat research is, not just in terms of species, but like in terms of like the kinds of things that are being done, from like museum curation to, and like everything that entails, to lab work, to field work of different sorts and varieties, to like the things that people like that bat researchers have to pick up on, like other skills and knowledge bases that they have to have in order to even do the research that they do. The equipment that's involved, carers, rehabilitators. So like not just people on the scientific end of things, but people more on like the conservation and wildlife rehabilitation side of things, which is that plays a role in this as well. The folks that, especially in the UK, dude, the UK bat carer community is phenomenal. They are so cool. There's also, talking to Nat Sabin, I was like, where's the closest bat carer to you? And when I say bat carer, I mean somebody finds a grounded bat and thinks that perhaps it's sick or injured, and then like calls a helpline and they dispatch a helper. That is how they have a call-in line that you can call and say, hey, there's a grounded bat here. And they're like, don't worry, we'll have somebody there in X amount of minutes. And they do.
I don't know why that's so funny to me, but that's hilarious.
They do.
And amazing.
It is amazing. I wish to God that we could get there here in the States, but you know, geographically it's a little more of a challenging thing. But like, and so I was like, where's the closest bat carer to you? And she was like, yeah, probably 2 or 3 miles away. I'm like, exactly.
Wow.
I don't know that there's a bat carer in the entire state of Georgia where I'm at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For California, I think there's only like 6 or 8 that like cover like a certain amount of geography within California.
Right.
I mean, it's just like not a thing here. So anyway, talking to them about what they do and sort of what their training looks like and how they got involved in it, it's a lot of fun, and it's going to continue to be a lot of fun. So yeah, Give Bats a podcast.
Super cool. And if you're listening to this, if you're out there listening to this episode as it drops or around the time it drops, the first couple episodes or I don't know how many you're planning on launching right at first, but like Give Bats a podcast is out. It is listenable. You can put it in your ear holes right now.
Right in the old bat caves. Just shove them in there and have yourself a good time.
Again, there's another great t-shirt. Just like put the podcast in your bat caves. I love it.
I'm actually going to write that down.
He's doing it. He's writing it down right now.
I'm writing it down just because I don't want to forget that. I've got like an idea list. Put the podcast in your bat caves. Yeah, so it has been a lot of fun. I am learning. You talked about like talking to cool people and learning things that you don't know about. It's like when the whole Pope thing happened, people were like, "Bat expert spanks the Pope," and I'm like,
There's a headline.
It literally was a headline in that, and things like that were being said right from the get-go. I'm like, if only you understood how much of a bat expert I am not. Like, if only you knew how much I am still learning. And like every episode proves that point just over and over and over, that you get so specific in your research that like I'm actually learning that like most bat researchers kind of don't have an idea of what other bat researchers are doing, because they're just like so involved in their little slice of what they've sort of niched down to, that like they want to hear what others are doing too, because like they don't get outside of their little bubble very often. And so like being able to connect bat researchers to other bat researchers is I hope another positive outcome of the podcast as well. So yeah, if you're listening, you want to learn about bats and their humans, then Give Bats a podcast. I would appreciate you listening.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that'll resonate well with a lot of the listeners of this show. I think that, I would encourage all of you to go listen to it. But so Nate, as we kind of wrap up here, one question I always ask all my guests, and it is, if you had something that you wanted to send the listeners home with, a piece of advice about life, about bats, about really whatever. I mean, It could be your favorite flavor of jelly bean and how to pick a good one. What would your advice be? What would you want the one take-home thing to be?
I think one of the things, one of my biggest pet peeves is not so much people not changing their minds, but people not being willing to think about things from other perspectives. And so I think that something that has served me well and that I think would help make the world a more peaceful place is if folks would just be more willing to just call it a thought experiment. Call it whatever you need to call it to get to the point where you can do this, but to just think about things from alternate perspectives as best you can, right? It's like, of course you can't think about it perfectly from another perspective because
Sure.
you don't currently hold that perspective. It's
Sure.
like you come from the framework and the background that you presently do. And that informs everything that you think and say and do, right? But like, if we would all be willing to consider the perspectives of others, I think the world would be a little bit better. And so that's maybe not directly bat related.
Oh, that's fine.
But it is, I think, something that that we could all do just a little bit better at, and we'd all be better off for it.
I agree, 100%. I love it. Man, thanks so much for coming on and talking with me and dealing with technical issues with me. But where all can we find you? Where are you? I know you're all over the internet. Google Bats and the Pope, you know.
Yeah, and you will find me very quickly if you do that. Very common search terms.
I mean, you know.
You might imagine. Yeah. No. Give Bats a break on Twitter. Give Bats a break on Instagram. GiveBatsABreak.com. I've got a website up that does have some merch. So if you're feeling spendy, then drop a couple bucks over there. And I like I said, I do want to get to the point where I can do what I'm doing like at a larger capacity full time.
Sure.
And that's one step in that direction. So any support in the purchasing of a shirt or a sweater or a hoodie would be most appreciated. And give Bats a break right across the board. That's where you can find me.
Very cool. Well, man, again, I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. I think I kind of feel like I've found a kindred spirit in you. And I'm looking forward to being your friend, going forward.
I love it. I'm so looking forward to it. I was giddy, I was like, we're finally going to get to see each other. This is so cool. So, yeah, man, thanks for having me on and giving me the opportunity to chat with you. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope that we always find a way to live our lives with more perspective and try to look at things through the lens of not only our own experiences, but of the experiences that other people may have had. If we're ever going to get anything together in this weird society, universe, whatever of ours, that's a thing that I think we have to do. Thank you for listening. You know that I think that you are the very best humans on the planet, and I am not just saying that. I appreciate it more than I can tell you that you give up your time and your valuable listening space to put these conversations in this show right there in the Bat Cave. Go follow Nate. Go look him up all the places, and definitely go subscribe to Give Bats a Podcast. Thanks for being a part of this every time. Again, y'all are awesome. I hope you are having a good fall so far. I hope October treats you well, or whichever month you happen to be in as you listen to this. I hope that life is treating you kindly, and be nice to each other, like I always say. And I love you, and we will talk soon.